We are being fed a steady diet of outrage about Somali immigrants in Minnesota, stealing hundreds of millions in money meant for charity, stealing our tax money to fund luxury lifestyles with fake programs. Disgusting, yes, but I want you to consider that this is another distraction. True, yes. Infuriating, yes. But it's the distraction that we need to look behind. To understand, we must look at some important events that unfolded in Minnesota last year and connect them to a significant announcement that just happened. We've heard of the child and human trafficking. We've been bombarded with reports of massive fraud of our taxpayer dollars by people with an average IQ of 65. It doesn't take a genius to realize that someone else is controlling and likely setting these people up. Many of these Somalians don't even speak English, and we are supposed to believe that they file grant applications for millions? You may not realize this, but most people hire fundraisers specifically adept at navigating the grant process, and these Somalians are being awarded millions. So I think it's safe to consider that there's something much bigger behind these fraudulent schemes. Just like there's something much bigger behind human trafficking than Epstein. And yes, the Hollywood freak-offs are much bigger than Diddy. Trust me on this one, guys. The systemic fraud is much bigger than a bunch of inbred illegals. Please understand that I don't mean this in an unkind or slanderous way. I've done my homework and it's factual and very relevant to their inability to be doing this on their own. Many of us remember June 2025 as a dark time in our state. On June 14th, 2 Democratic state legislators and their spouses were targeted in their homes in what authorities described as acts of political violence. Former House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark were killed. Hortman was the Minnesota Speaker of the House who voted to end welfare for non-citizens. She also knew about the $8 billion welfare scam and tried to stop it. 5 days later, she and her husband were murdered. Also, State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette were seriously wounded but thankfully survived after surgery. But here's the rub, guys. Something is about to peak with this story. You aren't gonna believe who is being fingered at the bottom of these shootings at the same time he's decided not to seek re-election. No other than Kamala Harris's running mate for Vice President, Tim Walz. The murder suspect, Vance Luther Bolter, is a 57-year-old man with a background in private security. He was arrested in less than 48 hours after a massive manhunt, which is rather rare in Minnesota, where crime runs rampant. Bolter was a Republican who Tim Walz personally appointed to his governor's Workforce Development Board in December 2019, so clearly there was some sort of relationship. In Bolter's car, a hit list was found with about 40 to 70 names on it that were mostly Democratic officials, including Governor Tim Walz, Senator Amy Klobuchar, Senator Tina Smith, Representative Ilhan Omar, and Attorney General Keith Ellison. The full list has not been publicly released by authorities. Law enforcement and prosecutors have described it in general terms, but have withheld the complete document, and I believe it's because it was a plant. The Legacy News that reported this list also painted Bolter as a crackpot, and to be honest, this appears to be another attempt to frame Republicans with planted evidence, since most of the people on the list were Democrats, including Walz. But the content of this list directly conflicts with Bolter's assertions, according to his interrogations and a letter that was found after his arrest. Authorities allegedly found a handwritten letter that Bolter had addressed to FBI Director Kash Patel. In this letter, Bolter confessed to the shootings and made direct claims about Governor Tim Walz. I'm going to read the entire letter to you now, word for word, as it was transcribed from the original document released through court filings, and you can decide for yourself.
Dear Kash Patel, my name is Dr. Vance Luther Bolter. I am the shooter at large in Minnesota that was involved in the two shootings the morning of Saturday, June 15th at approximately 2:30 a.m. and 3:30 a.m., or around that time. I will probably be dead by the time you read this letter. I wanted to share some info with you that you might find interesting. I was trained by U.S. military people off the books starting in college. I have been on projects since that time in Eastern Europe, North America, the Middle East, and Africa. All in the line of doing what I thought was right and in the best interest of the United States. Recently I was approached about a project that Tim Walz wanted done, and Redacted, and Keith Redacted, was also aware of the project. Tim wanted me to kill Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith. Tim wants to be a senator and he doesn't trust Redacted to retire as planned and thinks she is going to stay on at the last minute. With Amy and Redacted gone, Tim would get one of the Senate seats, and Redacted wants to be governor, and Keith Ellison, spelled wrong, would be rewarded with a lieutenant governor's position. I told Tim I wanted nothing to do with it, and if he didn't call off that plan I would go public. He said he would hurt my family if I did so. I better play ball. Then he set up a meeting with me and Mel Redacted and another redacted person to talk about options, and they had some people waiting to kill me. I was able to get away by God's mercy, so I went back a short time later and shot at both Redacted and Redacted. You should notice how I didn't fire one round at any police officers, and boy did I have plenty of opportunity. Ask for the report on how many weapons and ammunition I had with me. Cops were pulling up right next to me in their vehicles and I had an AK pistol aimed right at her head, and I could have left a pile of cops dead, but I didn't shoot one bullet towards law enforcement. You can ask them, because I support the police and don't want to see them hurt. But if they are hurting my wife and/or kids, next time I won't give them a pass. If you think I'm making this up, just get on the phone and tell Tim you have a few questions for him. Then ask Tim Walz if he knows me and see what he says. If he says he doesn't know me or never met me, look in the files and you will see that Tim Walz personally appointed me to be on his governor's workforce board as one of the business representatives. He is probably trying to destroy that info, but it's public record. Then ask Tim Walz why they kept the shots silent from the media when they first happened. Not a word in the press about it. Why? They needed to get their stories figured out first, so everyone was on the same page about what happened. Tim is probably crapping bricks right now because I'm still at large and he knows what I can do, and that I know about where all the buried skeletons are. So I will be shot on sight, you can bet on that. If you want me to turn myself in, it needs to be directly to you, and then I need to be held at a military prison, or in Asia, or the Middle East, or at least on a military ship over there. These guys have their guns everywhere and can get to anybody. I am willing to spill all the beans, I just want my family safe. They had nothing to do with this and are totally innocent. This was a one-person job.
That's the full letter. Bolter names Governor Walz directly, claiming Walz wanted Senators Klobuchar and Smith eliminated to open a path for himself to the United States Senate. He mentions threats to his family and a set-up meeting involving Mel, which many believe refers to Melissa Hortman. Now, fast forward to January 5, 2026. Governor Tim Walz held a news conference and announced that he will not seek re-election for a third term as governor of Minnesota. In his statement, he said he initially planned to run again, but after reflection, decided he couldn't give a campaign his full effort while focusing on the challenges facing the state. He emphasized that he ran for governor to do the job, not to hold the office, and that Minnesota needs full attention on its issues right now. Walz mentioned turning the page on a difficult 2025 and refusing to spend time on politics when the state has enormous challenges ahead. But do you know who didn't call Bolter a crockpot or a liar? President Donald J. Trump, who, on January 3rd, retruthed a video by a podcaster that asked AI for information about Melissa Hortman. The response was that she was murdered in her home by Vance Bolter, who was later caught after a huge manhunt. He sent a letter to the FBI and Kash Patel saying that it was Tim Walz who forced him to do it. Both Vance Bolter and his wife have worked for Tim Walz for years in different states. It then goes on to say Melissa Hortman was unalived because she voted against a multi-million-dollar money laundering fraud which heavily implicates illegal aliens, specifically Somalians. So once again, guys, we're stuck with the question of who do we believe, the media or the President of the United States? Do you think POTUS is off his rocker posting things like this, or is he giving us comms through Truth Social? Everything that I know tells me that President Trump is playing out an operation that has been carefully planned to awaken the people to what's been going on both on and off our planet. The fact that President Trump retweeted this has got to mean that it's something that we're gonna see coming out soon, and Walz knows it. How and when, nobody knows. Can you imagine being Walz? You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. If he flips against the deep state, they will expose what you've done. If he doesn't flip, he lives day by day knowing that you are going to be arrested and exposed, but you're hoping for time, living day by day, knowing your life is about to implode sometime soon and there's nothing you can do about it. I hope that every one of these things don't have to play out in the courts, and in fact, number 17 told us that these corrupt people won't be able to walk down the street, which kind of hints to the possibility that it's not necessarily the U.S. courts that are going to take these people down, but the people, because they're going to be so enraged by disclosure. As I've said many times, when you've known these truths for decades, as I have, you're no longer angry. You've resigned yourself to the fact, and instead, you focus on the fact that we are seeing people in very high places finally disclosing the horrors that we've known about for years. So everybody has to look at this and make their own decisions. What I see is a script of 2 murders. Whether they really happened or not, I don't know. But I do know that there's a dispute with the majority of the media, and some prosecutors and politicians are calling Bolter's letter the ramblings of a sick man. I also know that conversely, President Trump posted a video framing Bolter's accusations as true. I also know that the media is being dominated by the fraud that's being exposed in Minnesota and other places. I know that in the letter, Bolter says that the governor of Minnesota ordered a hit on these 2 people basically. I also know that the President of the United States posted a video saying that Bolter has said that he was working for Walz, and that both him and his wife have worked for Governor Walz for years. Does that convict him of murder? Absolutely not. What it does do is set the stage for further corruption schemes, specifically murder for hire. Again, if you've been around for a while, you realize that this isn't the first time it's been said that this is occurring. People like Seth, Rich, and Isaac Cappy and Kirsten W., who are widely believed to have been unallied for what they knew and were sharing. In some circles, there's body count lists for some of your favorite very high-up officials. It's interesting for me to see how dispensable some of these people are going to be when you know what hits the fan, so keep watching the show, guys. We're seeing a lot of disclosure come out. There's still some really horrible stuff that we don't know if it will ever come out. And when you think of it in a way, it already has come out, just not to the degree that it's occurring. I get this video to make you guys start seeing things that the media hides and to start analyzing them not by searching AI or fact checkers or even articles online. Analyze them through logic, and as you get more and more foundation, it's not so hard to believe that the probability of something unheard of is much higher than we know. I'm so thankful that all of this is coming out. Someone will say that it's very sad, and I know some of our sweet empaths will have a difficulty with this. But the more we learn, the more desensitized we'd become. And if we choose to focus on the end of these behaviors rather than on the past, we'll get through this much easier. Remember, we talked about the brain and how we can manipulate time and events through focus on the now. The now is that these demons are being stopped every day more and more. But the problem is global, and there's more of them than we ever anticipated. In fact, the thought has occurred to me that the reason the borders were opened like that, and these people were allowed to come into our country, was to lure these demons into the U.S., where we could locate and neutralize them much easier. Don't know, just a thought. Anything is possible in love and war. I want you to think about the timing here. Just months after these grave accusations surfaced, in Bolter's own words, accusations that Walz wanted a Senate seat badly enough to allegedly plot against his own party's senators, Walz suddenly steps away from his re-election bid. He had previously said he would run, even aiming for a historic third term. Now, with questions lingering from last year's events and the contents of that letter in the public record, he chooses not to continue. We live in a country where serious claims like these must always be thoroughly examined because nothing is as it seems. The American people have a right to know the full truth, especially when they involve elected leaders and threats to public safety, but it's not always as easy as a press release. The corruption is so widespread in virtually most states, and there are many layers to the corruption, so it's almost like the white hats are peeling an onion, exposing layer after layer of deep state networks or matrices. At one point, we will reach the core of people like George Soros and Bill Gates. Regardless of party, we should expect to begin seeing more and more depravity exposed. We knew that liberal hive minds are protecting illegals. We've seen the unjust villainization of Donald Trump and his supporters. We know that perversion, human trafficking, and satanic rituals are a means of reaching positions of power. We've seen the NGO corruption leading back to politicians at its core. Get ready, guys, because we may soon find out that our leaders have not only been stealing from Americans, putting our lives at risk and destroying our country. We may soon find out that they are hardcore criminals who murder those who get in their way, and Walz is not an exception, but the political rule. Not everyone on both sides, but we are hearing that about 70% of Washington and Congress are corrupt. Will political murder for hire wake up liberals? I don't know, but the disclosures are definitely flipping many, and the deep state is most certainly being exposed. Ask yourself, why is Tim Walz stepping away from politics instead of suing Trump and Bolter? Could the reason be because there's no way that Walz wants to push a hearing where evidence of his crimes will be in front of everyone's face? I say it's because he plans to just slither away like all snakes do. The attack is over and the enemy is retreating. One more time, guys. Trust the plan.